This happened to me when I was in my late teens during 2016. I was living with my dad in a small 2-bedroom apartment building as we were dirt poor at the time and couldn't afford a house or anything like that. A few blocks down from my apartment building was an old rundown elementary school that was built on in the early 90s. Because the school wasn't making enough money, the local government had no choice but to close it down, and ever since then, nobody's gave it much attention. A few people have been arrested for trespassing in the past, but that's besides the point. One night, my friend and I got off work and he decided that would be a cool idea to go into the school as we had never really been inside and wanted to see what it was like. Seeing as this was during the night, there was a slim chance of us being caught for trespassing. Even though the chances weren't high, we still thought the idea seemed fun, so in the end, I had to agree. That night, my friend and I bought a couple of those flashlights that made noise when you cranked them and also bought some snacks. He drives us to the school and we go through a broken window that had been boarded up. The hallways were practically empty aside from a few beer bottles, and the only sound we heard were a few drops of water coming from somewhere down the hall. We both decided that it would be best to split up in case any one of us found anything interesting. I took the second floor of the school while my friend took the bottom. I make my way over to a few classrooms and all I found was a few chairs spread around and knocked over, so nothing too interesting. I'd like to mention that neither of us didn't expect to find or see anything, so we were just basically doing this for our amusement. After about an hour of us searching through the hallways and classrooms, we finally decided to end it and head home. I told my friend that I'll meet him back down where we got in and proceeded to make my way over there. However, that's when I hear what I can only describe as sounds of bare feet running from down the hall behind me. I shine my flashlight down the hall, trying to identify the source, and that's when I start to become extremely cold. Let me point out that this was during the summer in Florida with 90-degree weather, and there was no way the AC unit in this building would still be running after almost 2 decades. What I heard next was something that absolutely terrified me, and because of this, I didn't get any sleep that night. I'm looking at one of the classroom doors, and that's when I hear, clear as day, the laugh of a child from the end of the hall. My blood ran cold and I lost my shit and booked it down the stairs and out the window, where I thankfully saw my friend waiting for me. He noticed me breathing heavy and asked what was wrong, but I didn't have the ability to talk at the moment. We got to my apartment and I told him everything. He gave me the "are you crazy" kind of look, but I told him everything. Being the good friend he was, he trusted me even though it might have sounded off. I didn't get a minute of sleep that night, and I definitely won't be returning to that school. My parents were on their honeymoon to Key West. When they arrived at the hotel to check in, they were told that the room would be non-smoking. With my dad being a smoker, they requested a different room. They got their room switch and went to their room. As they got off the elevator, the smell of fresh paint was overwhelming, and down the hall was a painter with all the proper and necessary supplies laid out around him, and he was painting the wall. As my parents walked by him, they casually greeted him with a hello. However, the painter had no acknowledgement of their presence. They shook it off as rude behavior, but whatever. My parents go back to get their luggage and the painter is completely gone. All the supplies were gone and cleaned up within 10 minutes, and the smell of paint was completely gone as well. At this point, my parents were freaked out, but didn't think much of it. The next morning on their way to breakfast, they overhear a tour guide talking to a group of people. My parents tuned in when the guy mentioned the floor they were originally supposed to stay on. Apparently, a long time ago, there was a painter painting on that floor when he fell down the elevator shaft to his death. I like to mention that my parents don't believe in the paranormal, but after an event like this that they really had no explanation for, it freaked them out a good bit. Before I begin with this story, let me point out that this didn't happen directly to me, but rather my dad while at work. He still has no idea as to who or what he encountered with, but this story still sends a chill down my spine whenever my dad tells me it. During the early 2000s, my dad worked as a doorman for a hotel in Queens, New York. His job basically consisted of answering phones, opening doors, and helping guests with their luggage if needed. He was a hard worker back then, and even though the pay was decent, he didn't like the fact that he had to work the late night shifts. One night, him and one of the custodians, Eddie, who worked there, were chatting away as the lobby was dead and nobody came in. As they were talking to each other, the phone from the lobby rang. My dad went to answer it and saw that it was from a room on the 3rd floor as the digital reading on the phone displayed it. My dad picks up the phone and says, "Front desk, how can I assist you?" All he heard on the other end was complete silence, as if whoever was on the other end wasn't saying anything. My dad said hello a few more times before finally putting the phone to the receiver. Normally, when someone called the front desk, it would usually be a home improvement problem that required fixing, mostly leaks that needed repair. My dad continues to talk to Eddie for about another 5 seconds when the phone from the same room calls again. He picks up again and says hello, but once again, silence. After he hung up again, my dad looked at the room number they were calling from, and that's when he made a disturbing discovery. As he was looking in the log, he noticed that the room hadn't been checked in or out. He felt a chill run down his spine as he noticed this. If anybody was up there, they were breaking the law, which meant that he had to handle the situation himself. My dad took the elevator up to the 3rd floor and opened the room with a keycard. The moment he stepped inside, it was freezing cold, and we all know what that means. Now, this was before iPhones had built-in flashlights, so he had to shine the light from his handheld to see where anyone could be hiding if there was someone. He looked under the beds, in the bathroom, and even behind the shower curtain, but still couldn't see anyone. Now this is the part where shit starts to get crazy. As my dad was leaving the room, he felt what he could only describe as a very cold hand grab onto his arm. He turns around and shines his handheld directly behind him, only to see that nothing was there. At that point, he throws his flashlight and starts running down the hall screaming at the top of his lungs. He immediately calls police, and they did end up inspecting the room, but nothing ever became of it. My dad had quit that job a month after that incident took place, and he was very glad he did. Till this day, he's still convinced that whatever he encountered in that room was completely paranormal. Before I begin with my story, keep in mind that this isn't the type of story to make you jump out of your seat and constantly get you paranoid. This is, however, one of the most creepiest and strangest experiences I've ever had with the paranormal. This happened to me and my friend when we were both 9 years old. My family and I lived in a very rural area of Missouri with a lot of back roads and wooded areas, and we would often have to go to great lengths to go into town. When my dad was off from work, he'd go into town that day to do all our weekly errands with my mom. This included going grocery shopping, doctor's appointments, work, and a lot more. We practically lived in the middle of nowhere, so life was boring for the most part. The only thing I got to do outside of the house was going to school or at a friend's house. During the time of this story, I had a friend who we'll call Rachel who attended the same elementary school as I did and just lived up the street from me. On top of that, we also had similar interests and a lot in common, so our friendship was strong. One day, my parents couldn't pick me up from school as they were out doing their weekly routine of errands, so Rachel and I had to take the bus back home. Once we got off the bus, I asked Rachel if she wanted to come over since my parents weren't home. Both of our parents knew each other and trusted us very well, so Rachel was more than happy to. As soon as we got inside with nothing to do, Rachel recommended that we go down in my basement and see if we could find any potential spirits. With us being only 9, we had quite the imagination. YouTube was only a few years old at the time, so we figured that if we filmed our cool little expedition that we'd gain a lot of exposure. Anyway, we proceeded to ascend down the basement steps while locking the door behind us. Almost immediately, her and I started getting a very negative energy around us. Rachel was the one that was filming and told me what to say and do. To say the least, we thought we were ghost hunters like on the TV show, acting like there was something with us down here. After about an hour of asking if anybody was here with us, only to get no responses, we started to get bored and decided to go back upstairs. That night, after she went home, I was looking through the pictures and videos we took of our supposed ghost hunt, planning on deleting them. However, one of the pictures caught my eye. I saw a picture of me by some old boxes smiling at the camera, but to the left of me was what appeared to be a white silhouette staring directly at the camera. I'm not sure if it was a camera glitch or something else, but considering the fact that we did feel some sort of energy around us, I really don't have another explanation. So, for some background information, I was 14 years old when this happened. I like to mention that I'm very socially awkward, making it difficult for me to communicate with other people, so I didn't have a lot of friends at the time. In fact, the only so-called friend I had was my first ever real girlfriend who I'm still together with till this day. I was great in academics but was horrible at socializing, so my teenage years were the most boring and lonely parts of my life. Anyway, this happened during the summer of 2008, and my family and I were going out on a camping trip to the Appalachian Mountains of northeast Georgia. It's a very nice place to camp, considering the fact that it's filled with a lot of national forest and grasslands with various rivers to go fishing in. We've been planning this camping trip for about a year now, and it's something we've always been looking forward to. Anyway, we get to the mountains and my dad and I unload our trailer and got everything set up for the night as we only had about a good hour of light left. We all drove to our nearby fast food restaurant for some dinner. As soon as we got back to camp, my uncle recommended to us kids that we go play manhunt out in the woods for our entertainment. For those of you who don't know what manhunt is, it's basically hide and seek in reverse. A group of people known as the fugitives hide while the other team known as the hunters try to find them. The game keeps going until the fugitives are captured by the hunters and the last person standing wins the game. We all had been given flashlights as it was practically dark out, and they were also useful to let us know when the other team was near. One of my cousins named Raj was on my team, and for some reason he wanted to hide wherever my hiding spot was. I chose to hide behind a big tree and Raj joined along. Him and I climbed up the tree to hide better, and that was when I noticed a large structure in the woods about a football field away from our current hiding spot. I knew it was man-made, as it had straight lines, and everybody knows that nature rarely makes straight lines. Thanks to the very little light that was still out, I managed to see it and immediately pointed it out to Raj that we should hide there. He agreed, and we both made our way over there, trying to make as little noise as possible. As we were about 10 feet away from it, we began to realize that it was an old cabin. At this point, we knew that it was probably private property, but the cabin looked very run down and abandoned, so we thought nothing of it. The front door was boarded up by wood and planks, so we got in through an old broken window on the side. We turned our flashlights on and shined them around the cabin. All we saw was some graffiti, empty beer bottles, along with some broken glass that we assumed was from the window. All of a sudden, Rod starts getting an unsettling feeling. He wasn't sure what was bothering him so much, but he had this strong energy surrounding him, making him feel really uneasy. I tell him that I was going to go outside to see if the other team was nearby. As I'm outside, I hear Rod scream at something from inside the cabin. He starts to run out frantically, telling me to go back to camp. When we get about 50 feet away from camp, I stop and ask him what the hell was wrong. He proceeds to pull up his shirt to reveal what looked to be a claw mark from an animal. He then explained that he turned on his flashlight to a corner of the cabin and saw what appeared to be a tall black figure standing there looking directly at him. When he turned off his light, he felt a sharp pain coming from his stomach, and that's when he saw the wound. Needless to say, we made it back to camp but didn't tell anyone about our encounter or what we found back there. I didn't get a minute of sleep that night, nor did my cousin. We still have no clue as to who or what was in that cabin with us that night. Either way, it's the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me.